welcome back to the Weekly Word Outdoor Adventures. Have you ever noticed this historical monument here on the side of Tellico River Road, right on the banks of what's called Quarry Creek today? It used to be Laurel Branch if you went back far enough, but today they call it Quarry Creek here right on the side of Tellico River Road, across from the big fancy covered bridge. This goes way back to at least 1825 with the Iron Works here, maybe even farther back. Some of the stories say even the Indians were running it prior to that. But they made a lot of iron here. Out of these mountains was good iron ore, and of course the timber to make charcoal. And this is the remnants of the old furnace. We walk right over here. It doesn't look like much today, but from what I've read, it was 9 feet wide at the base. You can see the stacked rock going up the side of the little knoll here. And it was 35 feet high in a pyramid shape. Up on top, they would have loaded the coal in to heat it and melt the iron ore out of the iron out of the ore, out of the rock. And then they would take it, eventually it turned into a really massive operation when Mr. Johnson bought 30,000 acres and built the mansion on the other side of the river, if you remember that. And they had a swinging bridge across the river, and they had the entire Tellico River dammed up to make a mill there with the water powered. And today we've got the Iron Works restaurant right up the road. That's where the name comes from. This is the old Iron Works. But one interesting story is eventually they were making all this pig iron blanks, and they would put it on rafts, and they'd put it in the Tellico River here, and they'd float it all the way to Chattanooga where it'd be turned into something else, eventually plows and stoves and things like that. But there was a story that when they loaded on the raft in the river, it'd go down the Tellico all the way to Niles Ferry, hit the Little T, floated on down to the Tennessee and on downstream, a long trip to get to Chattanooga. But one time they had a raft too loaded, the story said, just a legend, and it was passed down through the generations. And they said the raft was loaded too high, and 3.5 miles down the river here, it got hung on a sandbar. So they had to throw a bunch of the pig iron off into the river. Well, along about 1980, some of the local guys acting on that legend one summer, they decided to explore the river bottom in that area. And they found a bunch of these pieces of pig, they called them pig iron. And I'm gonna take you down here. We'll go down to the museum and we'll look at some of the ones that were later found. In the 80s, they went back in the 90s again and actually found some more of them, and turned out the legend was actually true. Let's go down to the museum and look at things. Well, here we are at the Charles Hall Museum, and as you can see, here are the pigs. And Charles Hall and some of the locals did confirm after about 150 years that legend was true. There was a raft full of them that stuck on a sandbar 3.5 miles down below the Iron Works, and much of it had to be unloaded and thrown in the river so they could float the rest of it on down. And they went back and found on the river bottom quite a few of these. But I think it was 1980, and again in the 90s they were finding them. I'd say they probably didn't find all of them. If you want to go look, you might find one of your own. Clearly marked Tellico on it. It's really interesting, isn't it? Well, we haven't entirely escaped the Iron Age. We still depend on a lot of iron in our lives today. The Bible says in Proverbs that iron sharpens iron. And boy, that's the truth. I use iron files to sharpen my iron chains on my chainsaws, and files for other things to sharpen iron. But I think what the Bible's talking about is it says iron sharpens iron as one person sharpens another one. In other words, that's emphasizing our need for fellowship with other Christian friends to make us think and work our minds. And that's why going to church is important. We need to be around other Christians because iron sharpens iron. So hope you've got a local church. If you don't, you're welcome to attend mine at any time. We'd love to have you. and get together with another group of Christians a time or two a week. You'll be glad that you did. We'll see you next week on the Weekly Word Outdoor Adventures.